Noddy Holder was born Neville John Holder on June 15, 1946, in Walsall, a small industrial town in the West Midlands of England. The world he entered was still recovering from the devastation of World War II, and families like his were trying to rebuild their lives with limited means. His upbringing was far from glamorous, but it gave him the grit that would later define his career. His father worked as a window cleaner, often rising early and working long days to support the family. His mother was a homemaker who gave the house warmth and stability, even when money was tight. From a young age, Noddy saw firsthand the value of hard work, determination, and humility. Music entered his life almost like destiny. His father loved records and often played them at home, filling their small house with songs that transported the family away from the struggles of daily life. Noddy grew up listening to the sounds of early rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and skiffle, which were shaping the youth culture of Britain in the 1950s. Unlike many children who saw music as background noise, Noddy was captivated by it. He wasn't content to just listen, he wanted to be part of it. The energy, rebellion, and joy of rock and roll struck him like a lightning bolt. It offered him a way out of the ordinary life that seemed mapped out for most kids in his neighborhood. By his teenage years, Noddy had picked up a guitar and started experimenting with singing. He didn't have formal training, but his voice was naturally strong, raspy, and commanding. When he sang, people noticed. His voice wasn't just pleasant, it was powerful enough to grab attention in a noisy room. He soon began performing with small local groups, testing his talent in pubs and clubs where audiences were often tough to please. These early shows weren't glamorous, but they gave Noddy his first taste of what it meant to be a performer. He realized he had something unique, and that thought drove him further. The early 1960s in Britain were a time of explosive musical change. The Beatles were revolutionizing popular music, the Rolling Stones were injecting danger into rock, and the Kinks were creating raw, working-class anthems. For Noddy, these weren't just names on the radio, they were proof that young men from modest backgrounds could become world-changing stars. In 1966, Noddy joined a group called the In-Betweens, a local band with raw potential. The band already had members Dave Hill, Jim Leah, and Don Powell, who would eventually form the legendary lineup of Slade. At first, they were just another struggling band trying to make their mark in a crowded scene. The group played anywhere they could, pubs, clubs, ballrooms, and even small town halls. Sometimes the crowds were indifferent, and sometimes they were hostile. But every show taught them lessons. They learned how to work a crowd, how to deal with hecklers, and how to turn an ordinary night into something unforgettable. Noddy's voice was the band's greatest weapon. It was raw but controlled, aggressive yet emotional. His ability to belt out notes with staggering force set the band apart from their peers. Combined with Dave Hill's flashy guitar style, Jim Lee's musical genius, and Don Powell's thunderous drumming, the group had the perfect formula. By 1969, they had transformed into Slade and began carving out a new identity. They embraced bold looks, flamboyant costumes, and outrageous stage presence. At a time when glam rock was starting to take off, Slade's energy and eccentric style fit perfectly. The band's first big break came when they signed with Fontana Records, but it wasn't until they connected with manager Chas Chandler, who had previously worked with Jimi Hendrix, that things truly started moving. Chandler saw their potential and knew Noddy's voice could lead them to the top. Their first chart success came in 1971 with the single, Get Down and Get With It. The song's rowdy energy captured the spirit of the band and gave them a taste of mainstream recognition. But it was only the beginning of what would become a string of massive hits. Later that same year, they released, 'Cause I Love You, their first #1 single. The unusual spelling of the title became a trademark for the band, helping them stand out from the crowd. Noddy's passionate, almost feral delivery of the lyrics made the song unforgettable. The success of 'Cause I Love You lit a fire. Throughout the early 1970s, Slade dominated the British charts. Songs like Mama We're All Crazy Now, Goodbye T. Jane, and Come On Feel the Noise became anthems for a generation that wanted fun, rebellion, and release from everyday struggles. Noddy's presence on stage was larger than life. With his wild hats, flamboyant outfits, and booming voice, he became the face of Slade's party spirit. Fans adored his confidence and humor, while critics admitted there was no denying his charisma. Slade's concerts were more than performances, they were celebrations. Audiences didn't just watch, they became part of the show. People sang, danced, and shouted along with Noddy until their voices were hoarse. For a few hours, everyone in the room felt free from their troubles. But Slade wasn't just about noise and energy. Beneath the glitter and volume, there was a deep connection to the working-class people who loved them. Noddy and his bandmates never pretended to be something they weren't. They wore their backgrounds with pride, and their music reflected the frustrations and joys of ordinary life. Their success, however, wasn't always global. While Slade ruled Britain, they struggled to crack the American market. Their brash style and working-class British humor didn't always translate across the Atlantic. Despite relentless touring, they never achieved the same level of success in the United States. Still, Noddy never gave up hope. He believed their music spoke a universal language of joy and rebellion. And even if America didn't embrace them the way Britain did, Slade's influence quietly seeped into future generations of bands like Quiet Riot, who later covered "Come On Feel the Noise" and found huge success. As the 1970s rolled on, Slade became one of the most successful bands in Britain, scoring 17 consecutive top 20 hits. They weren't just popular, they were cultural icons. Their sound, their look, and especially Noddy's unforgettable voice made them stand out in one of the most competitive eras in rock history. Despite fame and success, Noddy remained grounded. He didn't let celebrity distance him from the people. Fans often remarked how approachable and down-to-earth he was, whether he was signing autographs or chatting after shows. His humor and kindness made him even more beloved. Behind the scenes, however, the life of constant touring and performing began to take its toll. Fame was thrilling but also exhausting. The pressure to stay on top, to deliver hit after hit, weighed heavily on Noddy and the band. Still, they pushed forward, unwilling to let the spotlight fade. By the mid-70s, trends in music were shifting. Punk and disco were emerging, and glam rock was beginning to lose its grip on the charts. Slade faced the challenge of adapting to a changing industry while holding on to their identity. Yet Noddy's voice remained their anchor. No matter what direction the band took, his unmistakable shout was the heart of it all. Even when trends moved on, fans stayed loyal because Noddy's singing carried an honesty that never went out of style. Through all the ups and downs, one thing was clear: Noddy Holder wasn't just another singer. He was a force of nature, a man whose voice could fill arenas and whose presence could electrify even the toughest crowd. He became a symbol of resilience, joy, and working-class pride. But as time passed, fame proved fleeting. The younger generation looked to new stars, and Slade's dominance began to fade. Yet for millions of fans, the memory of Noddy's shout, his glittering hats, and the wild energy of those nights stayed alive in their hearts. Chapter 1 is the story of how a boy from Walsall, with nothing more than grit and talent, became one of Britain's greatest rock frontmen. It's a tale of determination, passion, and a voice that could never be ignored. But as the years turned, Noddy would face a reality far different from the roaring crowds of his youth. For decades, Noddy was known as the loudest voice in rock. His shouts shook arenas, his energy filled stadiums, and his laughter seemed unbreakable. But behind that image of strength, age and illness have left him facing challenges that no microphone could drown out. In 2018, shocking news emerged. Noddy had been secretly battling cancer for 5 long years. Doctors told him early on that the disease was aggressive and his future uncertain. It was a revelation that left fans heartbroken, realizing their hero was fighting a battle in silence. For Noddy, the diagnosis was devastating. He had lived most of his life on stage, commanding attention with confidence and power. Suddenly, he was thrust into a quiet war against something he could not outshout, outplay, or outlaugh. The treatments were grueling. Chemotherapy and radiation drained his energy, leaving behind a man who had once been unstoppable now struggling to do the simplest things. Still, he fought with the determination that had fueled him since his childhood in Walsall. He chose to keep his illness private for many years.